Welcome to For the Record, an unfiltered view on current trends and timeless advice for surviving in the aesthetics industry. Whether you're an injector, practice owner, sales rep, or marketer, it's time to set the record straight. Each week we cut through the chaos and showcase diverse perspectives and winning ideas from the best minds in the industry. I'm your host, Dr. Tiffany Hall, Chief Growth Officer at Aesthetic Record. Now, let's get started on this week's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to another week of For the Record. We're here in Season 2, Episode 2. We have a fantastic guest today who is on the cutting edge of where I think we're going as an industry. We have today with us Lexi Yoo, who is a double board certified nurse practitioner, also an integrative functional medicine specialist, guru expert. She has a clinic that's doing all kinds of interesting things, including a direct pay model. She's doing functional medicine, she's doing aesthetics, she's doing weight loss, really all the things. And she's also a relatively new entrepreneur who is, trudging through all the challenges that we all face as we build businesses and as we try to staff and onboard and hire and retain and make profit all at the same time. So she's here to give us her information, insights, her tried and true tested stories about her on-ramp to becoming an entrepreneur. And she's here with us today, Lexi, via Zoom, virtually at least. We wish you were here with us live. But I think that you're used to doing a lot of this virtual stuff, aren't you? You just said you do telehealth a lot. So you're good to go with us, but I want to hear all about you and your practice. So you're in Indianapolis area, kind of, in Indiana, and you've got this incredible practice. So walk us through what you're doing right now, and then we're going to start from there and jump off into your history and what you've been doing for the past couple of years and the whole thing.
For sure. So in my practice, we do kind of like a split model between integrative functional medicine. So when we talk about what does that actually mean? So when we talk about functional medicine, that mindset kind of comes from finding the root cause of problems. So that's where we spend a lot of our time, is finding root cause of problems. So we get a lot of patients with gut issues, autoimmune conditions, and really patients come in with symptoms and they have no idea what the root cause is. And that's kind of what brings us to us. So we focus on that. And then when we talk about integrative medicine, so what is integrative medicine? That is incorporating different types of modalities other than mainstream big pharma medicine into that model. And then when we add in aesthetics, it kind of just rounds out the whole patient experience. So when I do an aesthetics consult, I'm making sure, are their hormones optimized? Because if you think about estrogen, for example, right, when women go through menopause, their estrogen is obviously declining. Well, when that happens, they lose collagen in their face, they lose that tone, that elasticity, they lose the moisture, that plumpness. And so not only am I fixing their hormone issues, their vaginal dryness, their sex drive, their libido, I'm preventing osteoporosis, dementia. I'm also, plumping their face back up with whether I'm using biostimulators like Sculptra or PRP or stem cells or peptides or BDO threads or Dysport or, the whole toolbox. It's so cool just to kind of put it all together for the patient. And so it's an amazing, I'm so blessed to do what I get to do every day.
And truly holistic, right? Like we talk about that word, we throw it around all the time in this industry about holistic care, but you're really doing holistic care. And I think, your practice name, Yoo Direct Health. So I think the idea about direct, so I think a lot of our listeners don't do insurance at all. They have no idea about insurance. They've been in aesthetics so long they forgot about ICD-10 codes and billing. But you're doing a lot of truly medical type procedures, obviously, a lot of these things with hormones and such, but you're not billing with insurance. You have this whole direct care model, which we're going to dive into later on. But I want you to give us just a quick idea about what that means for your business and how that differs from like going to the physician, at a clinic somewhere to get insurance type, procedures done.
Absolutely. So I truly believe that this will be the new wave of how medicine will be practiced, mainly because we have high deductibles. If you haven't met your deductible, your out-of-pocket costs are going to be $3,000, $5,000. And a lot of my patients are actually small business owners, just like myself. So it's really financially in their favor to approach it from this modality. Not only that, you get more time with the provider. So direct pay model basically means we take insurance out of the equation. What happens is there is a annual membership fee. So a patient can join our practice. And basically, the way I describe it to patients in like simple terms, it's kind of like an HOA. It's like you're buying into the program, right? And so what I explain to patients is that gives you a direct access to me. So we have we call it a patient portal. So we have a amazing EMR system. We have an app that we've developed with the EMR system, so they can literally send us messages, refill questions whenever they want. We have direct text messaging system, so instead of calling and press 2 to hear this and press 3, nobody has time for that. I'll just have patients, hey, just shoot me a text in like a week or two, just kind of let me know how things are going. And patients love it. It like personalizes that experience. So for a 1 year membership, so it's a rolling fee. So every year on the anniversary month of when they start to us, for an individual, it's $125. Let's say if they're like, okay, you fixed me, now you got to fix my husband, which we do quite a bit of men's health, which I think should be another thing developing the aesthetic community. Is I can't tell you how many police officers I have, they come in and get their tea, and they're like, why I'm here, and they do it, whispering with the door closed. Can I get a little Botox while I'm here? Or, hey, can you tell me what you think I need? And then it leads into a whole nother conversation. But so if they add on their significant other, the cost is $200. So once a year they may pay $200 for a visit. If they're paying for just let's say a lab review consult, the cost is $75, which is actually very inexpensive. Now where things can add up is all the integrative stuff that we do. So let's say they come in, I do a consult with them, and I say, hey, you are perimenopausal, right? So you're in your late 30s, early 40s. Your estrogen is still there, but maybe you're low in testosterone and progesterone. Okay, maybe you'd be a good candidate for pellet therapy. Okay, awesome. Or let's say you're holding on to 15, 20 pounds that you had after your baby, who's now like 7, right? And you want help with that. So I say, okay, phase 1, let's figure out what's going on here. You have a hormone imbalance, right? So that lab review is $75. Let's say in that appointment they actually want to add in and maybe do some pellet therapy, so they'll pay the cost of the pellets, right? And then let's say, I follow up with them in 4 weeks and I'm reviewing their post pellet labs. Again, that cost is $75. But let's say they want to see our health coach for some nutrition help, and they want to add in something called peptide therapy to kind of optimize that growth hormone to help metabolism. Again, those are all added costs. And so I don't like being locked into any contract. So it's a kind of like a pay as you go, like an a la carte situation. Now, whether that's a good business model or not, I don't know, but I can tell you patients, what they appreciate about us is we're very transparent on how much things are. And a lot of times they'll say, hey, don't get that this month, get it next month. It's actually going to be on special next month. And they're like, oh, okay. And then what's great is they'll send me a portal message, say, hey, I want that special we talked about in our appointment last month. And I've made notes on it. I'm like, cool, great, we're done. So patients really, really like that. What we do not do, though, is we don't do primary care. So we still have our patients have a traditional primary care provider, so they can see their UTI or their poison ivy or their sinus. And what tends to happen is a lot of times they'll get their primary care once a year labs, like their cholesterol panel or their A1C, but then they kind of bring those labs to me, and they'll pay me for my basically health consulting almost in that regard. And I'll say, okay, I need you to be on a cardiometabolic food plan. We need to work on reducing your insulin levels, and let's start by using like a low glycemic diet. And I might throw in some peptides, and I have them see our health coach, and that's kind of, they're getting the most out of the best of both worlds kind of thing. They're still using their insurance for their blood work or their primary, but now they're like, okay, I'm going to add like the finishing touches on that outcome, and then they'll come to us and we kind of just make it better. So that's kind of how we're a little bit different. We don't do primary care, but we focus more on like health optimization or biohacking, really. We do that too. And so there's that part of it. And then as far as the aesthetics goes, so we have a lot of our patients do aesthetics, but we also offer aesthetic services to patients who don't see us for hormones or gut health. A lot of times they end up becoming a patient because they're like, well, I want to do whatever they're doing because that looks amazing, so it feeds in very, very well. The best thing though that I would say, especially as new practitioners, who are in aesthetics, like maybe I want to add this on, you have to either one, invest the time and energy into actually doing it right, or hire someone in that's their goal, is to focus on learning all the minutia and the details and the proper documentation and the proper follow-up required. Because sometimes I do get patients from other practices, and it was an aesthetics practice, and oh yeah, they put pellets in me, and then they're coming to me and they've got acne everywhere, they haven't had their labs checked in a year, and I'm just like, okay, we need to start over here. So my best advice is to any aesthetic practices looking to add this in, which I think it's phenomenal to do. You either one need to decide, can I devote this time to doing that research and that study, or do I need to hire a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant or a physician and have them kind of like head up that department of my practice? Because as someone who splits time between both, it's hard. It's very, very hard to be good at both of it.
When I think about your appointment times, I'm sure they're very long, right? If you're doing both the functional integrated part and aesthetics, I'm sure that you're seeing patients in many cases for, hours. And so I'm sure you're thinking more, as I think about your practice, more high margin, low volume, because you can't see as many people when you're doing all these different things. But, you mentioned perimenopausal, being late 30s and holding on to the baby weight. Lexi, I'm almost 40 and I have an 8-year-old. So I think you're speaking to me directly that I need to get it together. But we're kind of in this age. I think people forget about anesthetics. The primary age for that right now, it's shifted down so much. Obviously, when I started in this business, 9 years ago, you were going to be 55. Whatever the target age is. Now it's like 30. 32, 35. We are the audience. I'm the person who needs hormones, progesterone, estrogen. I'm losing my hair. I'm losing my bones. All these things are happening to me. And I also really want to get Sculptra. I really want to have Dysport, and I want to have big lips. And I think to your point, it's the same kind of patient. So for me, I think about your business as like you're really this retention like magnet for patients. They can come to you and get basically everything, right? They don't have to go to somebody else for toxin and come to you for hormones and all these different pieces. But what you said about doing this right, I want to touch on that because legally speaking, I'm from Arkansas. And there was a long line of people who got in big trouble for pellets. They were doing it incorrectly, overdosing people. Just the bottom fell out of that market in Arkansas. It became illegal, just a disaster. And so I want you to speak about that, like learning how to do it. Where did you learn this? What are the watch outs and cautions people who are trying to get into this, who are kind of putting their toe in the water of like, you either got to do it or you don't?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in hormone therapy about 3 years ago actually, scratch that. I started my own practice 3 years ago. 2 years prior to me opening, I was working for an internal medicine doc, and he didn't really do women's health or weight loss, but he was looking for a female to bring on and kind of hey, take it and run with it. The best quality he had is he was never a micromanager. He was like, hey girl, just do your thing, let me know if you need anything, I'll be over here, you do your thing, I'll do mine. And that really just kind of like let me try things out and see what I liked. He was very supportive in that, just kind of be independent. So I would say that kind of gave me the like, hey, maybe I can do this by myself. So I actually started and I have a couple different integrative certifications, but from the hormone, especially the pellets, because that's majority of what we do. Like last month we did somewhere between 200 and 250 pellets, so that's a pretty high volume practice. And I believe we're the highest volume practice in Indiana. So I got trained in hormones through the Institute for Functional Medicine, which is considered the gold standard in functional medicine. That teaches me side effects, what labs to look at, nutraceuticals. So not pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals. So that's like a vitamin that we're utilizing for its properties in helping mitigate side effects or optimizing the hormones, right? And then I did another program through it's a training and marketing company called BioT. And BioT is probably one of the leading hormone pellet training companies in the country. There's a couple other ones out there, but they're kind of like the mainstay. Big in Texas for sure. And so I started with them about 4 years ago and started to get really good. And then about 2 years in, they saw my volume, saw my outcomes, came, interviewed me, and they asked me to be a proctor and a mentor for the program. So I actually mentor other nurse practitioners in what to look for, how to troubleshoot, looking at labs and all those things. So I went through their program. It's like a 3-day training course. And unfortunately, pellets can get a bad rap. And you might hear some OBGYNs like, oh, you go to a 3-day pellet course and all of a sudden you're a hormone expert. To a point, I somewhat agree with them. But again, you're going to have to invest that time, just kind of like I said earlier. So that was the stepping stone to keep going. That was not the ending point. That was the stepping stone. So after that, I did the Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. I did the Anti-Aging Medical Management Group, and I've done a couple other little hormone certifications along the way. So honestly, it's kind of just like adding another little layer of education to each thing. And so I would say, if you're wanting to get trained, A4M is a really good one. They'll go over pellets and things like that. What drew me into BioT was, being a nurse practitioner, being female, looking young. Sometimes people have a hard time taking me seriously when I speak to them, and I will quote research, and then there's no problem. There's never a question. But looks can be deceiving, as I'm sure you probably get that too. And so what drew me into BioT was there was a network of nurse practitioners, PAs, physicians, OBGYNs, internal med, family practice, where if something happened, which I better knock on wood, nothing has happened, but if something were to happen, I can call on those guys and say, hey guys, I need some help. This is what I've done. Can you do a case review with me? And they will. I mean, there's plenty of times I've called them like, hey, can I run this by you? I'm not too sure. And they'll have either OBGYN call me and who's ever on clinical. And that's kind of what drew me in is it's you're creating a network of people just like me. And especially in the Midwest, that's hard to find. So that's kind of where I started there, and then just kind of adding in the other certifications along with that.
Well, let's take a step back and just reiterate the fact that you are both double board certified as a nurse practitioner, and you have you just listed 6 or 7, I don't know, or more things that you're doing from a training perspective. So you're obviously investing in your own training heavily. Now, as an entrepreneur who owns a medical spa, functional wellness clinic, if you want to call it that. Sorry for the misnomer there. And you're also employing other people now. What is your perspective on that, even in your career now? Like, how do you keep growing and developing and investing in training while also balancing all these other things that you're doing? Because I think that's people have a problem with A, I have to spend money on it, and they get a little cheap. But B, it's a lot of time, and I don't have time for that. How are you doing it?
Yeah. So for me, I don't know if you know much about something called the Enneagram, but it's kind of like a personality test, and I'm a 3/7. So a 3 is an achiever. It's kind of like you stop at nothing to keep going. And the 7 is the innovator. It's like always the hype person kind of thing, right? So I'm a 3/7. So I'll give you an example. When the pandemic happened, my husband's like, "Oh my God, what are we gonna do?" Da, 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 da. And I'm like, "Listen, all you see is barrier. All I see is opportunity. We're gonna launch this podcast. It's gonna get some education out there. We're gonna take this telehealth. We're gonna establish some different protocols so we can take it to a larger scale from the computer." And it worked. It like blew up really. We had so much growth during the pandemic. It was crazy. So what I would say is one, you have to have a supportive partner, and I'm sure you know that just as much as I do. They have to be supportive because it won't work if it's not. I would say the second thing is employing staff that have the same drive mindset as you do. Now they don't have to be a 3/7, but I would say that they have to want it just as bad as you do. And in return, you need to support them. You need to do your job. Kind of like I said, that the best quality about the doctor I worked with is like, just go ahead and do your thing. I'll be here if you need me kind of thing. What I would say with my NPs that I employ and I onboard is I meet with them every morning. I'm like, all right, let's talk about like I literally staff every case with them because I want every patient experience to be as if they were, I don't want to say seeing me, but getting the same standard of care that built us. So I would say that can be a struggle, but the best thing I would say is you want to touch base with your staff. You want to have that one-on-one time with each of your staff because then you're aware of where everyone is as far as their goals. And then I would say that the other thing is that time management is hard, but if it's worth it to you, you will find the time. So, the biggest thing that I would say is people say, I don't really have time to work out. And again, like, so I'm a mom of 3. I have a set of twins. I own a business. I still work out 4 days a week, sometimes 5, but because it's important to me. That's kind of like my Prozac, right? So I have to go to bed at like 9:30 at the very latest. I get up at 5:15. I get to the gym by 6. Fortunately for me, my gym is right next door to my office. So I literally go, shower, walk right next door. And then that's when my NPs come in and I staff cases with them literally while I'm getting ready. Usually I'm putting makeup on and they're going over their cases. So it is difficult, as I'm sure you very well know, but it's not impossible, I guess I would say. If it's important to you, you'll make it work.
I'm also a 3/7. We are kindred spirits, so I appreciate that about you. But I think what you just said about the pandemic, I look at our company, Aesthetic Record, it was the busiest we'd ever been. Like, we blew up during the pandemic. It was so chaotic. People were looking at their practices. Am I profitable? What am I selling? My retail sales, are these promotions killing my business? I get a membership program. And people who took advantage of that time and really just nailed down what do I want to be when this is over? Where do I want to go when this thing is finished? We see them now succeeding and growing rapidly, where others who are paralyzed by it, whether it was the fear of it or the unknown of it. They couldn't do anything. They're still trying to rebuild here, a year later from us coming back. And now, of course, we're in it again, unfortunately. But you mentioned telehealth. And I think, if I remember correctly, that's how I found you, because you were doing telehealth nonstop on your Instagram last year, posting about it. And I was like, man, we had just launched that featured AR. And I'm like, here's a person that knows what she's doing, that's figured out telehealth and is leveraging it to do national care, if you will, from the comfort of your computer at home. And I think that to that point, you kind of helped me understand how this thing could work, because I was still trying to figure out in aesthetics, like, how can we do a virtual consult if we're trying to sell filler? It was a hard thing for me to understand, but you were doing it. So how has your practice scaled nationally based on even that one decision to really go wide on telehealth?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is, especially for nurse practitioners and providers, is to know what your state guidelines are, because it can be kind of hairy when it comes to telehealth. Um, with the pandemic, there were some laws saying, okay, you don't really have to have a telehealth license to practice telehealth, if you're treating them with, for COVID or COVID related conditions. Well, me looking at the hormones, that was not necessarily related to COVID. So in our state, you have to have an on-site appointment, like where I physically have to lay hands and do an exam on the patient at least once a year, Okay. So typically for our patients, that's because they've exhausted every avenue of healthcare. They're like, listen, if you make me feel better, I'll come whenever you want. So honestly, many of our patients, I have a couple patients from California, Texas, Ohio, Illinois, New York, tons from Florida. I keep telling my husband, we need a second location in Florida. And he's like, whoa there, just let's get this building built first. Okay. He's an 8, by the way. So I don't know if you know much about 8s. He's the black and white. And yes. Okay. So that's, he's the 8 to my 3-7. But so I definitely think that, so understanding the laws, and then what I feel that has helped us grow is providing education through social media. For me, that was huge, right? So I launched a podcast. And so in a lot of the services that we offer, there's usually a podcast for just about everything, like why you need a gut test. So it kind of puts it in front of their face, like, why do I need Yoo Direct Health in my life? And so then they fall down the rabbit hole. So the greatest thing is when they come in for that first appointment or that on-site, they know all about me. They're like, oh my gosh, Diego is weightlifting. That's my son. Look at how big chubby baby is getting. That's my daughter. They'll ask all things, and then they come in, they know exactly what they want. They're like, I want to do a gut test, Lexi. I want to get these pellets, and I've already ordered their labs and gone over them through telemedicine. And then they want to come in for aesthetics. So a lot of times they come in, from out of state. They'll be there for like 2 hours because I'm doing their gut review. They're meeting with a health coach. They're getting a hydrofacial. My aesthetic nurses may be doing some injectables on them. So they're coming in for like, everything. So I would say is that, it's actually fairly easy to do, but you have to show them why they need your services, or what can you bring to their health table, kind of thing.
What I envision for you as well, they can engage with you all year long. I think about like reading labs and things. I don't need you physically in the practice with me to tell me what my lab said, right? We could do that virtually. I think there's so many ways in functional medicine to leverage telehealth that perhaps we don't have in aesthetics, unless you're doing a skincare consult and different things. But I really believe that's how I figured out who you were, because you were doing so much education and so much telehealth during the pandemic. But I love what you said about when they come into the practice, they've already heard about the procedures. Social media, I just had a podcast yesterday with another person. We were talking about, social media has become very celebrity infamy. It's fun. It's TikTok, it's all the fun things. But people who are using it to actually educate and leverage their brand and talk about their procedures and credential themselves, I think it's a much different vibe. I'm sure patients come and say, gosh, I already feel like I know you. I've listened to your podcast. I've seen you on videos, on your Instagram. I feel like that happens with me because of the podcast, different things. I'm sure it's the same for you. And they trust you without even, sight unseen, right? Because they feel like they're already in your living room with you. They know your kids, what you're doing. So even with your little boy, I think you just broke a record with weightlifting or something I saw on your Instagram. I think that brings them into your living room, if you will, like we used to do like the radio shows back in the old days when we didn't have TV. I feel like it's the same kind of thing. And so, for your social media prowess and thinking about even that for your business, what is your long-term goal leveraging that, the podcast, YouTube channel? Like, what is your overall idea for that long-term?
It's crazy because I get this question quite a bit, especially my husband and I were in the process of building a new facility. Currently, we're in a 1,500 square foot space, and the new building that we're building is going to be 22,000. So we're going up in space quite a bit, right? And what's comical is to apply for our SBA loan, we had to show them our business plan. And I kind of laugh because I'm like, I don't know, I don't really have a business plan. I was just going to kind of just do some stuff that I like and just kind of teach people about it. And my husband's like, listen, they're not going to give us like a $5 million loan with, well, my wife's just kind of like, just going to see what happens. Like, but it's worked. And so I would say, my goals, especially through social media, social media can be good and it can be bad where I, especially with aesthetics, it is tough. I don't see this as much in the functional medicine world or the integrative world, but you see some of these brand new injectors and we all got to start somewhere and I get it, but it's almost like they're overdoing some of these things for that wow social media factor. And I'm like, what kind of damage you're causing to some of those lips. And so I approach it more in the, hey, it's more than just a before and after. Let me tell you why you need chin filler. We're going to talk about projection. We're going to talk about the aging process. When as you age, your bone demineralizes and it starts to recede. Talk about malocclusion. Talk about, just the actual education behind it. And I feel like that's what brings the patients to us. Not like I want these big juicy lips that I saw. It's, hey, I noticed I had some, and they'll say vertical lip lines, and I think I want, a little something in there. The best thing is I had a new patient. I've never even met her before. She requested a new patient appointment, and it said, new to aesthetics, I would like Restylane, Kiss, and Sculptra. She's never had anything injected in her face, but you can tell she's been following us on Instagram because we do ask, how did you hear about us? So that tells me as a practitioner, I'm doing a damn good job of educating them because they recognize things by name. Not like I want my lips done and I'm tired of looking old. It's so specific. So I think that's huge. I think just I call it edutaining, educate and entertain at the same time. I think is huge. And I would rather have a smaller community of social media people who are engaged and interacting versus 20,000 followers and there's not a whole lot of interaction happening there. So that's kind of what I see with that. Podcasting, we're still gonna keep doing that, and I kind of do it as I see topics present themselves. Like, what am I seeing in clinical practice? Like, we really need a podcast on that. With our YouTube channel, so in our patient portal, we have a private YouTube channel, and the reason is I do a lot of Zoom classes for patients. So let's say they work during the day and they missed the class, so they can go back, log into their little app that they have with Yoo Direct Health, and go back and watch the class, and that counts as a consult. So this way, if they decided they wanted to do a certain peptide, they're like, I already got all the information, Lexi. I don't have any questions, and we proceed on. So we do have a YouTube channel, but it's exclusive to our patients. So that's where, again, buying into that practice, it gets you access to all those cool things. So that's kind of where I see it. I don't really see. I just, keep doing what I'm doing kind of thing. New this year, I was asked to be a gain trainer with Galderma, which is so exciting. And so I'm sure that will bring in some more education in regards to aesthetic technique practices. Have you thought about this? Adding in, putting the whole package together. So I can't wait for that, especially this in 2022, they are going to really be kind of, I don't want to say relaunching Sculptra, but like really kind of adding it, putting more eyes on Sculptra, which we started doing that last year, and it's been amazing because if you think about our practice is long-term, longevity. What's going to give me the longest duration? How can I age beautifully and do it very naturally? A lot of our patients want natural results, and so really Sculptras, kind of where we're going to see a lot of that. So
Well, I think that's like the regenerative functional side of it. This whole like building from the inside out. I think sculpture, to your point, radius obviously has some biostimulatory, components to it. But I think about filler, all these filler indications. We just had infraorbital hollows come out from Allergan last week. I think filler will start to either have to step it up and be mixed with some kind of a stimulatory product or have a PRP indication with it or something to make it, have some oomph, or we're going to see it start to wane and we're going to see more of a spot corrector, which I think it currently is a spot corrector, right? And we're going to see things like Sculptra, more platform-esque regenerative products come to the table. But I know a thing or two about the gain training program. I spent a couple years in the trenches there, so congratulations on that. That's a big honor. I'm sure you'll do a fantastic job. But I think to your point, to the gain trainer point, to the point of social media, this is what fascinates me about aesthetics in general, is that we look at practices who have, a gazillion followers, right? 100,000 followers, crazy amounts of people following them. And industry will say, who are the big influencers? And I'm like, you know what? Take your influencers. What about the practices who are making a lot of money, who are very profitable, who are running good businesses, who are legally compliant, doing the right things, have great patient care models? When do they get the love? Because they don't often get asked to do things because the shiny glimmer of the influencer takes over. And so I think we're doing it to ourselves as an industry because the industry, the manufacturers, are so focused on the influencers. And I think about, to your point, a long-term success is like you're going to sustain, for decades with your model, right? You're going to sustain because you've got patient care as your central, you're looking at education. You're not worried about the fame and the infamy and the celebrityness of it right now in this moment. So I think that there's a huge issue in our industry in general. And as a new person, entrepreneur, you're having to figure all that out, right? You're having to figure out, where do you spend your marketing money, on building your practice or building your name? And there is a place you have to decide which one you want to put your money on, because you can be famous as Lexi or your practice can be famous. You got to kind of make those choices. So even thinking about that for your own brand, how do you balance building you as a celebrity versus building your practice as a profitable entity?
Sure, absolutely. I try to follow this concept of managing up, right? So there's only one of me, and there's only so many times in the so many hours in the day, right? So how can I don't want to say clone myself, but how can I scale it? How can I scale it, right? So I have a nurse injector who she's done some training, but I've trained her personally, with the techniques that I like to use. And we're always doing training. Dr. Harper was just training us 2 weeks ago, right? So when I have a patient that maybe I can't get them in for some dysport in, a week or two, and my aesthetic nurse Carmen does, I might say, hey, Carmen, Carmen does my dysport. I beat, she's trained with me. I kind of put my stamp on there and say, she's Lexi approved. She's great. She's great. And so a lot of times patients, they'll say, I'll see Carmen, I'll see Lexi. I don't care who I see. That's how I know I've done a good job of building, not me, the brand. It's the brand of Yoo Direct Health, not me. With my nurse practitioner. So I have 2 nurse practitioners who work for me. They don't do aesthetics, they do functional medicine, integrative medicine. And so, all the time I'm on social media a lot. The 2 girls, they're not as comfortable on social media. And I just tell them all the time, like, you got to get over it. People like seeing real. But, I always say, look, this is the patient that Haley saw, and this is what she did. And this is how much better she feels doing that. Or, if they're like, well, has she done many pellets? I'm like, yeah, she's done all of my pellets, and I'm still here, kind of thing. So it's managing up, or it's showing their amazing outcomes, because they are amazing. And really, putting the confidence that I have in them and say, you're doing a great job. Staff need to hear that. They need to hear it no matter what people say. I used to work with 8 surgeons my first job out of NP school. So hearing good job was never really something you would ever hear from surgeons. If you've ever worked with surgeons, I'm sure you've known a couple of them. And so as a business owner, I need to do a good job of letting my staff know you are appreciated, you're valued. Is there anything new that you want to do? And every performance appraisal we have with our staff, I'll say, do you feel fulfilled? Is there anything new you want to add on? Because you just say the word, and I literally will knock down every barrier to get you to that training and get you that experience so you can do that. And my husband in the performance appraisal always say, listen, don't say it unless you're ready to do it. Because Lexi moves at like 10 times faster than most people. So she's going to get going. So if you decide to do something, you need to like be prepared to do it. So I would definitely say managing up the brand. It's not about me. It's about the practice and the good work that we do with patients. But what's so interesting, I would say one of the best referral sources that we get locally are these mom groups, like Indianapolis Moms Group, or Moms of Toddlers, or a different city like Fisher's Moms Group, Noblesville, and it'll say like, hey, I think my thyroid might be off, or hey, does anyone see anyone for hormones? It is amazing, like that, better than any billboard, magazine, anything, because it's our patients and it's their experiences. So they're like, oh my gosh, I was dead, she found me, I was alive, and my thyroid's great again. Or they get into their stories, and I'm like just fanning my eyes reading it, because I'm like, I didn't have to say anything. I didn't have to say anything. And they'll say like, Lexi doesn't take new patients right now, but get on the wait list, or go see Mara. That's who I saw. She's fantastic. So that's how I know I've done a good job as far as building everybody up, not just me, not just me.
Well, I love the idea of an evangelist or an advocate, and I think we miss that. We do a lot of consulting here in our business with practices who want marketing dollars. Where do I spend it? What do I, do I do branded billboards? Do I do social media ads, pay per click, all these things? To your point, I'm thinking, go fish in your pond. Find if you have 100 patients, let's say, for instance, find 10 of them who love you and who think that you're incredible and make them your evangelist. Make them go out and talk about want to feel compelled enough to talk about your brand and what you do. And I think to your point, moms, we stick together. I think when you've birthed a baby, you find people who are like you, and you've done it together. You're stuck in there, as best friends, if you will, and finding these groups where people are like each other, right? It's kind of that lookalike model. Even like on Facebook, if you do the Facebook list for marketing and such, the lookalike model is always helpful. But to your point, if somebody in that group loves you, they can't shut up about you, right? I mean, if you gave them back their sex drive, they've lost weight, they feel good, their face looks good, why wouldn't they talk about you? But I think the difference in that is that you're treating the whole person. You're not just treating their lips. Like no one goes out and says, "Look how great my lips are," and tells all their friends. But they would say, "She brought me back from the dead. I was like miserable, depressed, whatever, and I did this thing, and now I feel so great." They will talk about that, and so I feel like from a patient retention standpoint, because you add in the actual like wellness of the human, with all the things that you're doing, that's a much different reason to have a conversation than just saying, "Gosh, my toxin looks really good. You should go see Lexi." Not nearly as compelling of a story, if you will. So I think that's why I think functional medicine is growing so fast, is because people, to what you said, are coming back from the dead and they're thanking, hormones and labs and gut health and all these things for it that we didn't know even really existed. It wasn't even a thing we had access to, 10 years ago. No one talked about functional medicine. They talked about going to the doctor, getting a prescription, and hoping it goes away, right? Figuring it out on your own. And I think for women especially, I put this in our notes for today, women I think are very scared of it. I owned a CrossFit gym for many years. I know that you guys are big into CrossFit, and all of your employees I think do CrossFit. Your husband's a level 1 weightlifting coach. I was the same. Back in the day, I was really big into fitness, guys. I know you can't tell that now, but I used to be big into fitness. But, I think about women who I would train coming into our gym, and they were so scared to get, I don't want to get muscles. I don't want to get big. I don't want to have like roid rage. They were so concerned about their body changing and becoming manly that you even mentioned testosterone or estrogen or levels, and they panic about, I'm going to have roid rage and have giant muscles. I'm like, no, you're going to be normal again. Like, wouldn't you like to be able to lose weight like an average person and have metabolism again? Like all the things you could, benefit from doing this. And they were just a nervous wreck about it. So you're seeing women all the time, obviously, in your practice. How do you get through that? How do you get through that whole like testosterone? You still need that even though you're female kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. So, again, kind of going back to some of the social media, we often do something called Testosterone Tuesday, and we often will say like myth, and then we list the myth is, and then we're like fact, what it actually is, and I'll list. I often hear patients say, "Well, I went and saw my doctor, and they said that this is." There's no evidence to support it. I'm like, oh, but there is. They just don't know where to look. Or here, let me print it for you. Take it to them. Let me know what they say. And so a lot of times, because we do such a really good job of educating our patients, very rarely do they um, kind of second guess. Again, maybe because our evangelist patients are so good at like, listen, girl, you need to go see her. You need to tell her you want some pellets, you want to get your gut checked, and you want some peptide therapy. They come in primed. Like I literally don't have to do any selling. I just kind of say, okay, like what are your top 3 goals that you want to figure out? And they're like, and then they tell me that what they want. I'm like, okay, great. And then I often laugh too because again, a lot of my staff are CrossFitters, and we have something called an in-body analysis. So if you're going to do wellness and weight loss, you have to have a body composition machine because especially with testosterone, you know, the number on the scale can be very deceiving. So we'll have women who will say, well, I got on testosterone and maybe the scale went up 2 or 3 pounds, or I'm exactly the same, but I feel like I lost inches, right? So we'll do an in-body analysis on them, and that'll tell us their skeletal muscle mass, their lean body mass, their body fat percentage. So a lot of times, if their weight is the same, but they say, I feel like I've leaned out a little bit, I'll recheck their body fat percentage. And a lot of times that helps. When they say, I'm afraid to get bulky, and I'm like, well, listen, as someone who has tried to bulk up, it's actually really hard. It's really, really difficult. Like you're getting your protein, you're getting your branched chain amino acids in, you're getting your peptides in. Like it's really hard. It's really, really tough. And especially with how depleted your hormones are, girl, it's going to be a couple of years before you have to even worry about that. So we don't really, in my practice, and maybe again, because we have so many patients who Carmen, my nurse, will say, do the Lord's work, and like they spread the gospel as far as why you need this in your life. we don't really have that now. I would say probably when I first started, but again, it was kind of like one of those things. People would see me at the gym and they're like, "Oh, look, she's lifted more weights," or people would see friends of mine who started coming to me, and so I've never really had that as an issue as women like worried about getting bulky. I would say they're worried about growing a mustache. And, and I'll say, well, listen, you're going to feel better. We can always lower the dose of testosterone, but I got a Clarity 2 Lutronic in the next room where I could laser that right off. And they're like, okay, it's fine. Just go ahead and proceed on with the hormones. But again, that comes from experience and knowing dosing and monitoring labs. So for as much as I hear kind of bad rap of pellets, especially, we do a really good job of managing side effects, lab values, those things. There's no way we would be as busy as we are if we weren't doing a good job. So no, I don't really have that as a concern, but maybe it's because of the breed of patients that we have now are kind of like the referrals from the starters, so they know that that's not going to happen.
Well, your practice is probably the healthiest practice in America. You've got CrossFitters, you have nutrition coaches, you have weightlifters. I mean, you guys are all you're walking the walk, right? Not just talking the talk. I think that's another part of it. If I think about functional medicine, integrative medicine, when you go to a clinic and someone's telling you how to get healthy and they are not the picture of health by any stretch, it's hard to take them seriously, right? It's hard to, I think about the same with aesthetics. It's hard to go to someone to get your aesthetic treatments who is, not quite so aesthetic, right? They don't present the way that you'd want to look, overdone, overfilled, whatever the things are. And you're like, you know what, sister, I don't want to look like you, so please do not inject me. On second thought, I'm going to leave and go, across town. I think you're the picture of health that your patients want to become as well. That's got to be comforting for them too, to see that whatever you're doing is working. So I want to do what you're doing. So as I look at your staff, you guys are all like very fit and trim and energetic, if you will. I think the energy levels, for us in this business, it's exhausting in aesthetics. You know that it's freaking exhausting around here. We all work like 90 hours a week, and I think about from a wellness perspective, like I'm a mess. My body's a hot mess express. And so just giving people the ability to have energy again, live their life again, to be a great mom because they're present again and not exhausted. Like these are the gifts that aesthetics can make you feel beautiful, look beautiful, but to feel alive is a much different idea. It's a much different caliber treatment for a patient than just saying, gosh, you sure do look good. Yeah, I think we undervalue it so much, but I think you guys are obviously doing it right because people are coming to you in droves. But I want to transition from that into the actual business part of it. So you're running a business, you're an entrepreneur with your husband, by the way. I know that life, sister. God bless your soul. It's hard to separate work and home and all the things. How are you managing? How are you managing that part? First of all, how do you work with your spouse and not kill each other? We all want to know that.
So what's interesting is because my day is jam packed, it's busy. I don't even see him. I see him in staff meeting on Monday morning, and then I might see him at lunch. I may not, because a lot of times the NPs will come into my office area where I sit, and we'll staff cases like, okay, guys, how'd the morning go? Who's good? Who's not good? What do we need to adjust? Any protocol changes we want to make, and then if there's anything going on in the afternoon, like, okay, who's got what? Who needs help? Do you need to staff that case with me? So really, I don't see him hardly ever during the day. The beautiful thing is that he is a business guy. He has an MBA. He used to work for the government. He used to be a financial analyst for the Department of Defense. So he's very good at numbers. He's very business savvy. I have no interest in any of that. My gear is clinical and innovation and social media. That's what I was. I'm like, I just want to inject faces and fix people and put it on the gram. And he's like, okay, well, you can't run a business like that. I'm like, I don't know. It's worked so far. So we kind of like let each other do our thing. Um, the nice thing is because he is very, very organized. He's at 8. He's black and white, very organized, very bullet pointed. It makes the business run very well from a structure perspective. But as far as the innovativeness, that's me. So he'll kind of say like, okay, within these little confines, can you make this work? With that. The other thing is that I'm always going to trainings. I'm always educating. I'm always doing those things, and so now again working together, he'll say, okay, he'll say, love, that's what he calls me. Okay, love, how much is this going to cost? What's the ROI on that? What's the, how much you're going to charge for it? How many procedures do you need to do to recoup the cost of that? How much, what are your cost of consumables? So literally it's taught me, I'm like, crap, I got to have like an Excel report and like a PowerPoint of like why I need to get this laser in my practice, or why do I need to, pay for sculpture training? Because like we said, sometimes it's expensive. It's expensive to be smart. It is, but well worth the education. 100%, 100%. So, that's the thing is that, I'll say, hey, I'm going to go do this training. And he's like, all right, well, how much is that going to how much is that going to cost? But especially him looking at the numbers, he has seen the benefits of all that education that we've done, and all the financial decisions we've made have been great. So I'm very lucky in that regard, and that, he keeps me very grounded to what is reality kind of thing. But I would say when we get home, um, for the most part, because our children keep us so stinking busy, there's really not a whole lot of time to powwow and chat about what happened at work. I would say probably in the later evening times, we might talk about, like, different things that we want to change, or new hires, or what's going on. But honestly, most of our day when we're at work is not really spent with each other. He spends more time probably with my front office staff and my back office staff than he does me. And then in the evening, because our three kids keep us so busy, we don't really have to kind of uh, rehash work, kind of thing. So it's actually not bad. I actually do enjoy working with my husband, in that regard. But again, he's an extremely supportive partner, and that makes it more possible for.
Well, Lexi, do you know Kim Welch in Dallas? Because I'm hearing you talk, and her husband Ryan is the same way as your husband, very black and white. He's an accounting guy. She's an innovator, clinical, loves all the things. They have twins as well, and a third child too. And we had this discussion last year on the podcast. She's like, if I love something, I'm going to go buy it. Like, I'm like, I can justify anything. If I want the laser, we can get the laser. And Ryan's like, now, Kim, is that going to work out? Can you make the payment on that with what you think you can produce as far as revenue? And I'm listening to you talk, and I think it has to be this yin and this yang thing where if you're this like creative, innovative, go hard person, you have to have that person to kind of wrangle you in to say, all right, let's think about this for a second. Do the numbers make sense here? And so I look at entrepreneurs who are in your exact same position, but they're doing both. They're trying to be the numbers person, the marketing person, the payroll person, and the injector or physician or PA or NP in the room as well. I'm thinking, how on earth can you be your own sounding board? Like, you need people who can tell you, who can be a devil's advocate and say, that's not a good choice, or gosh, why are you not doing that? It's a brilliant idea. I think we all need that to balance us out, because to your point, I'm a 3 and a 7 as well. I'll just go. Like, I'll go and take no prisoners, and be, look back and I've already spent a couple of $1,000s. I'm already, and this is like on minute 4. So I need a person to kind of rein me in as well. So I think, to your point, him helping you with that is probably a great recipe for your success, I would say.
Oh, definitely. I'd agree with that for sure.
But you're building a new building, so you're expanding. Walk us through that decision. When did you decide you have to get bigger and go large? You said $5 million. Like, that's a giant facility.
You're telling me. So we talked about the pandemic and how we exploded, right? So in the middle of the pandemic, I hired another nurse practitioner. I kind of said, oh, maybe we'll start you part time. Yeah, that lasted maybe all of a month, and then she was full time within like 3 months, right? So I started her through the School of Applied Functional Medicine. She started getting formal training. I sent her to BioT. So they kind of started the framework, and then basically she did like a 3 month, almost like a 3 month residency with me, where we were seeing patients together, staffing cases, all that, those kinds of things. And then we hired a nurse injector full time. So she started off as a back office nurse with the hopes that I could use her in the aesthetic world. So we were doing microneedling and hydrofacial, and then the time came where, all right, Carmen, it's time for you to learn how to inject, and that was her goal. So I kind of say she paid her dues, kind of thing. She learned how to do the prior auths on medications and room the patients and did all the things, and she is a godsend. I love my office nurse. And then over the summer, I had a nurse practitioner student who did her last specialty clinicals with us, and she was also a very good fit. And so we interviewed her. We thought that she had an interest in functional medicine. She CrossFitted, which that is not a requirement to work in my practice, but it does help, because I know that she's into nutrition. She's into what, we kind of, our goals align. And I think that's huge when you're bringing in staff. Do you guys align, and does everybody kind of align with each other? Um, So because we have now two nurse practitioners, a aesthetic nurse injector full time, and then we have a health coach, we need more space. And so that's kind of where this all came from. We've been on a wait list all of 2021. The entire year we were on a wait, we're still on a wait list actually. And so because of that, I can't hire more nurse practitioners until I have a new space. So it's kind of like, I got interviewed actually this morning for a local magazine, and they're like, what would you say is the biggest barrier to your growth? I literally said space. It's not patients, it's not providers. Like I've got tons of nurse practitioners who are like, whenever you want to hire someone, let me know. And I'm like, okay, well, you better start getting educated now, because don't wait to come in. You better start the framework now. But it's space. And so in the new facility, so we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna be going from a 1,500 square foot space right now in a building to our own building, which will be 22,000. And so what will happen with that is we are going to split it up. So what we envision right now, or the way that the layout is that Yoo Direct Health itself will take 10,000 square feet, and then we'll partition, hopefully, to two other tenants. And there are some potential things in the works, on what that could potentially be. In the new facility, our goal is to bring on a full-time esthetician, so we can have someone running the hydrofacial, microneedling, maybe bring in lashes, those kinds of things. We do something in the regenerative medicine world. We do something called acoustic wave therapy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with acoustic wave. So we use it for a couple different things. We actually purchased it for pellet scar tissue to prevent the risk of extrusions, because a lot of our male patients are very, very lean. A lot of them are CrossFitters, and so they develop that scar tissue, which then can cause the pellets to extrude or work their way out. So we originally purchased this device for that reason. Well, then I started learning, again, going into some of the men's wellness, is we started using it for male erectile issues. So when we talk about male erectile issues, a lot of times it's calcification buildup in the shaft of the penis, and so it's a blood flow issue. So what the acoustic wave will do is it'll break up those calcifications and then help increase the blood flow to that area. And so we're going to have a little area for that as well, and we'll start utilizing the acoustic wave not only for erectile issues but for regenerative medicine as well. So joint therapy. We're looking at bringing in a athletic trainer to do some mobility assessments, potentially bringing in some prolotherapy. So prolotherapy is where we can take like PRP and inject it through ultrasound guided imagery into a joint, potentially some exosomes or stem cells, something like that. We are going to have an IV therapy room. And so right now we already do some IV therapy, but it's just not super convenient, because I'm like, crap, it's like eating up a room, right? So from a business perspective, it's like, okay, well, can I be making more money in that room versus an IV that's going to take, an hour or a half hour or whatever. So we're going to have a little, kind of like a little four chair little spa area, if you will, where they can kind of grab an IV if they want to get an IV. We'll have consult rooms. We'll have three different types of aesthetic rooms. We'll have a laser room, and then two injector rooms there, and then like a holding room, where you could like flex back and forth. So yeah, potentially bringing on an esthetician, athletic trainer, probably two more nurse practitioners that I've already kind of got picked out. One of them is going to be a male nurse practitioner to help kind of support some of our men's health wellness and some of our regenerative medicine joint type stuff. And then one more nurse practitioner, because my goal for me is I really enjoy teaching. And so I can have someone to kind of help manage my patients, so I can go places to train or research or lecture or do things like that. So yeah, so that's kind of how I envision us growing into the new space.
Well, talking about making a big leap, going from 1,500 square feet to 10,000 is massive. I think the real estate aspect of it is genius, right? You rent out to tenants, they pay the mortgage or the note on it. That's the way to do it. I totally agree. But you mentioned male aesthetics, and before we kind of hop off here, I want to kind of touch on that for just a second. Hiring a male NP, I think, is a great choice, right? Because it mirrors the patient, et cetera. I think they say now in our industry for aesthetics only, it's maybe 10% of the population's male. I think that is barely even scratching the surface. And what you're doing and offering other services that are complementary or, tertiary to that, I think bring them into your practice. But on the aesthetic side specifically, because that's what a lot of our listeners, they're in the aesthetics world only. How do you get male patients in the door?
So for aesthetic services, a lot of times they'll come in for either gut health or testosterone replacement therapy or a peptide consult. And the room that I'm sitting in, they see the aesthetic chair, they see the like little needles off to the side, they see the diagram, and they'll say, "So do you guys do some of that Botox there?" That's like their segue, and I'm like, "Well, yes." And then I say, "Hey, let's look at your face," and they're like, "No, no." I'm like, "Come on, I'm just gonna look at your face." And so then I kind of say, "Well, what bothers you?" And then they're like, and then of course, they're shy at first and like, "Okay, well, I got this line here, and then I got these," and so I think a lot of times because it's very when they come into the practice, it's very non-threatening. We don't have a lot of like pink and glitter, like they might have seen their bro in the waiting room getting their pellets on the they're coming on the way out or getting labs or picking up their supplements. So it's a very non-threatening atmosphere, and it's very just informative. I'm like, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm just here to kind of you asked if I do this. So I would say is that, the way I segue into that is that, have you thought about that, or does that bother you? And then, we kind of go from there. Or the other thing I will say is if I know that their spouse gets injectables, I say, "Hey, when's it going to be your turn?" And then they're like, "Well," and then again, it kind of segues into maybe getting some injectables for that as well. But yeah, I mean, it's not as hard as I think. It could be, but I think it would be harder if we didn't offer those ancillary services that gets them into the door. But it's kind of like once they're there, they're safe, right? And so then it's like, oh, okay, I can stay here for a little Dysport, or I want this fixed.
Well, yeah, because ageism is real for men too. I think about that even more now than it was, 5, 10 years ago. That ageism is not just a female issue anymore. I think men in sales roles, obviously divorce rates are higher, so they're back out in the market again dating. But I think the evangelist thing that you mentioned before, like having the person in that sort of male group that's been to you, had your services done, whether it's just aesthetic only or both wellness and aesthetic, to go out and talk about you is a great recruitment tool. And I think practices underutilize or under leverage the male influencer, the male practice influencer that can go out and be your talking head. But I would love to see in the next, couple of years that goes from 10 to 25%. I think men are just a completely untapped market, and they will spend the money if they believe it's going to help them and they want to come to you and they feel safe. To your point, they trust you. It's like, this is my little, my little safe zone. They'll keep coming back to you and they'll keep spending money with you and nobody else because they've already established that relationship with you. And so if you're listening to this, guys, maybe it's functional medicine that you need in your clinic to get men in the door, because I do think that is just a gold mine still left untapped.
I would actually say for the aesthetics, we get more men for hair restoration than any other aesthetic services. And what we do with that is we might do PRP or PRF. We combo that with some peptide therapy or some PDO threads in their scalp, or even some stem cells. And so I think again, and then showing those before and afters. And a lot of times, if you look on my Instagram, you might see the before and after. And then I literally list the protocol of what I did. So when they make their consult, they say, "I want Lexi to do PRF, and I want some of these peptides." And so they already know. Which makes it a very easy sell. I don't have to sell anything. I literally just book the appointment, and I'm like, "Okay, let's draw your blood." So I would say hair restoration is probably the easiest segue, that if you don't want to bring testosterone to your practice, hair restoration I think would get men into the door big time.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Well, we're at our hour, which I think has gone by so incredibly fast. I could talk to you all day. You have such a fascinating, I don't know if the word's presence, but I feel like you're an innovator, you're creative, but you're also very humble and you're focused on patients, and you're kind of the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle, which I think is fantastic for the podcast, because so many times we look to people in the industry who don't have it all together. We think that they do because Instagram says so, but I think you've proven today that you actually really do have, you've got it together. You're on the right path. You're doing cool, innovative things. I think what you did during the pandemic was brilliant, just genius. So for those of people who are wanting to find out how to learn more about your podcast, your YouTube channel, your Instagram, give us how to find you.
Yeah, so our website is www.you spelled YOO directhealth.com. Our Instagram handle is you direct health underscore aesthetics, and our podcast is on Apple Podcasts as the Better You spelled YO project, um, at Apple Podcasts. So any of that is good.
Yeah, we can learn all about functional medicine and about all the services that you offer, because education, to your point, man, you can't put a dollar sign on that. You cannot ever underestimate educating patients, because they walk in and they're ready to go, right? They're a warm lead or a hot lead coming in, asking to what you said before for Sculptra specifically by name and, and a certain product.
Sculptra and kissing her lips. Sculptra in her face and kissing her lips. New to aesthetics. That's what the chief complaint said.
Patients are getting smarter. They're getting inundated all day long with information. So it's our job as industry people to, first of all, dispel the myths and get WebMD and Google, and all the bad things that happen out of their minds and show them to what you're doing a better way forward. So for the record, you have been a fantastic guest. I could, again, talk to you all day long. Hopefully you'll come to Aesthetic Next and be on our faculty. We want you on stage in September, so mark your calendar. We want to hear more from you and all the things that you're doing with peptides. I didn't even go into peptides, and I'm so curious about that whole thing too. So you'll have to clue us in on that in September. But guys, go out, check out Lexi's website, check out her Instagram, her podcast, learn from her. What's your next thing that you're doing this year? Give us one more lasting thing that you're going to knock off your checklist in 2022.
So I'm actually sitting for my aesthetic fellowship, practicum and exam through the Academy of Anti-Aging. So I will be a certified aesthetic fellow through A4M.
So, nothing really going on this year at all for you. Building new buildings, getting new fellowships completed. You're a busy gal, and being a mom and everything else.
I love to learn for sure.
Well, thanks so much for coming today. And those of you who are listening, again, check out Lexi, and we will see you all for the same podcast next week. Bye, guys. Thanks for listening to another episode of For the Record. This podcast is not intended to provide legal or medical advice. It's for entertainment, education, and information purposes only. For more information on this week's guest or to get started with Aesthetic Record, email us at info@aestheticrecord.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more fresh perspectives on disrupting the status quo and surviving in the aesthetics industry.